Okay, so it's raining today. It's pretty dark outside, so I thought I'd do a video inside. This is one of the issues we came across when we first moved here. And so I'm going to play you a series of old videos when we first got here. And what it is we were living in this truck camper that I built while we were nomads. When we moved here, I took the truck camper off the truck, put it on a base. I made a base for it. And we were gonna have to stay that throughout the winter, or at least a portion of the winter. We started building this tiny house. Well, we started building it, I don't know, early spring, but then we really got going on it about September of that year. Then we didn't finish the tiny house until January. We had all those months of wintertime that we had to stay in that camper. And I needed to figure out a heat source because remember back then, that was the pandemic and going out and getting propane and that kind of stuff just wasn't an option back then. So we had to figure out a way to heat the camper without propane. Well, I had this idea. And it got modified, the idea got modified, probably for the worst. Somebody asked me to go over this again. So I'm gonna show you a video of a heat exchanger I built. If you would, I'd appreciate it if you would watch this video all the way through at normal speed, give a thumbs up, maybe a comment, I'd really appreciate it. This heat exchanger I built, so go ahead and take a look at this. What you saw me doing earlier with these bricks right around here on this corner is I'm stuffing mud in there to try to pack it up. When I circulate the air with a fan, because that fan is going to suck it into the camper and then I'm going to have another fan blowing it back into my heat exchanger here. I'm trying to seal it up as good as possible. The thing I wanted to show you is the inside here. It's not closed up yet. I'm going to close it up tomorrow. This spot right here is what's going to get heated. It's going to get really hot. This brick here, I will run a pipe here, and so the heat rises. So I'm going to take all the hot air from here, I want to pump that right into the camper. And then over here, I'm going to put another one just like it. And so it'll come from the bottom and take the air, the cold air out of the camper and put it back into the heat exchanger here and then get heated up as it's traveling into this one. I have to put a piece of metal for the chimney. That's the chimney output right there. It's upside down, but that goes on top of the stove here. Then I'll put the metal, and then I'll run a chimney up, and then I'll put another layer of bricks around the metal to hold that heat in. And then right here, I will have a piece of ductwork. The heat will come out of here, and it's really hot. You stick your hand in here, you're going to hold it in for a few seconds. That is where the ventilation will go. Right now I have a fan blowing on the other side, right there, and it's pushing that out. And right now, this is at 200 degrees. And so the heat comes out of here and will enter into the camper. Then you have the return, which will come out inside the camper and down by the bottom. Right here. Air will be drawn in from the downside of the camper and then pushed back up to the top of the camper here. In the videos where you see these heat exchanger videos, you'll see people who won't use any type of blower to blow the heat around. It will work automatically. You don't need electric for this system. Originally, I had planned on doing something different, and I'm going to explain that different in just a minute. But what had happened was, again, we were in the pandemic, and I didn't want to go out and try to find lumber to build something appropriately. So I got on YouTube, and there was this guy who was on YouTube. Now, he's not on YouTube anymore. As a matter of fact, he got tired of not being able to speak freely on YouTube, so he stopped doing YouTube videos shortly after he made a video showing me how to make an outdoor heat exchanger with bricks. Now, what was nice is we had a ton of bricks around here. I mean, a ton. They were just everywhere. They used them for steps to get into the old mobile home they had. So we decided that's what we were going to do. The theory of it worked great. It did keep us warm. I first want to admit that. It kept us warm. But the problem was it used a ton of firewood. It used 8 cords in 3 months. Now you got to remember, we were in a little camper. This tiny house, which is significantly bigger than that camper, only uses a cord of wood in this wood stove. Now again, we were in a pandemic, so we were limited on what type of wood stoves we could buy. I didn't want to buy anything really fancy like this one because it was going to sit outside. I didn't know how that would react. As a matter of fact, when it would rain and snow, it would build up moisture in the camper. Now, something I wasn't able to show you in that video was the tube, the ventilation, came up off the top of the stove and into the camper. And now I think I did say in the video that heat rises. So that just went right into the camper. It worked fantastic, kept us really warm. Sometimes it got too hot. As a matter of fact, inside the camper, I had to put a flapper to regulate how much heat was coming in, because sometimes it just get too darn hot in there. But I'd have to get up every 2 hours and fill it up with wood. It used a ton of wood. But the thing is it worked, and I was really happy it worked. It was better than nothing. I was asked if I could explain what I would have done differently to make it work better. I'd actually had planned on building something similar for this tiny house. But then when I realized how terrible that worked, I wasn't too sure I wanted to do that and spend all the money on something for this tiny house when we did have the space to put a wood stove in here, and it's really pretty. It's great. So what I had planned on doing was building a small building around the wood stove. And when I say small, I mean just enough that the wood stove is within specifications. You got to have it so many inches away from the wall. I forget what it is. I believe on a caddy corner like this, it can be 8 inches. But then when it's turned straight, it has to be 12 inches. I don't know. It's in the instructions. So you would build a building that your wood stove would make all those clearances. Of course, in the front, you would want to have it a little bit longer or wider, so your door would open and you could get wood in, and that you could stand in here comfortably. You would want it somewhat short of a building. You don't want it real tall. So maybe just enough your head could clear. Maybe. I wouldn't make it any taller than 70 feet at the most. Now the thing is if I were to build it, I would build it probably out of 2x8s. not because you're looking for structurally sound building. What you're wanting is insulation, a lot of insulation. One of the primary problems we had with that Franklin wood stove, well, there was a lot of problems. One, it was not a modern wood stove. These modern wood stoves are fantastic. They don't waste heat. That wood stove, it was a Franklin built back in the 60s. It was very, very, very inefficient. And the entire front of it had no bricks around it. So all that heat would come out towards the front of that wood stove. So when it would snow, you could actually see probably a 6-foot span in front of the wood stove that was melted. That's how much heat it was putting out into the yard. So you want to try to capture as much heat as you possibly can. Now you would still run the ventilation very similar as what you ran it into the camper. You would run it in where it would go up, so heat rises and it would come into your house. The problem is if we did a tiny house, your inlet would be way up here. So since heat rises, it would be difficult for the heat to get down to the floor. So that's one downside, so you may want to run a blower. Now the other thing is these new wood stoves, I don't know if you can see that very well, there's ventilation that comes in from outside into the back of the wood stove. So that sucks fresh air into the wood stove from outside. So what you would do in that case, I think, is you would take that fresh air inlet and you would run it from your house out to the box outside. So your box would be, let's just call it 4 foot by 4 foot by 6 feet tall, insulated just massively. You wouldn't want any heat escaping from that except through the ventilation. Now your ventilation would also have to be insulated really, really, really well. You buy that insulation from the store, it's like, I don't know, it's real thin. There's not much to it. So you want to make sure that you could get it really insulated. And then once you did that, you could probably get quite a bit of heat into your house. But I don't think it would heat near as well as what it does with your stove inside. So the only time I wouldn't recommend doing anything like that is if you were living in a camper. A lot of people do live in campers. And I know with the camper we have, there's no way we'd put a wood stove in it. It's like a matchbox in there. So you could do it for a camper, but it probably wouldn't heat the whole camper. You would have fans running everywhere trying to keep it up. The other thing you might be able to do is run ventilation throughout multiple areas of the house. One into the bedroom, one into the kitchen, one into the living room. That might help. And if you weren't in the living room at nighttime, for example, maybe you could close off the living room ventilation. You'd have to keep the kitchen open so it wouldn't freeze. So there's things you could do, and I probably would do that if we were living in a camper. The other reason I might do it is if I lived in a municipality or a regular house and my insurance wouldn't allow me to use a wood stove. If you did it outside, I don't think your insurance company could scream too much that you were going to burn down your house with a wood stove. But in general, I would say do it this way, unless you have those couple of exceptions. You're not going to waste near as much firewood doing it this way. So if you click this up next box, take the video where I'm showing you how I was building this tiny house. So I hope I can inspire you to do what you have to till you can make it better. Thanks for watching.